We're going to bring it from 25% to 50%, the tariffs on steel into the United States of America.
Carney says Canada has one of the most open steel markets in the world, and changing conditions mean Canada needs a new approach.
Over time, we become too dependent on the United States as our biggest customer, with more than 90% of our steel exports going south of the border. We must rely more on Canadian steel for Canadian projects.
They use tariffs to kill us. They use tariffs to take our businesses, not only steel, other businesses too.
Within 24 hours, Donald Trump signed a 50% steel tariff that shook America overnight. The U.S. bled $4.2 billion. Detroit's auto plants froze, and Prime Minister Mark Carney slammed Canada's export door, cutting off 40% of America's steel lifeline. Prices soared, jobs stalled, and families braced for impact. What was meant as protection may now implode Detroit, and the question is, can America survive the fallout? On June 4th, 2025, before most people started their morning commute, Donald Trump's new 50% tariff on steel and aluminum was formally signed and published in the Federal Register. The White House stated it was meant to protect American industry under its Section 232 authority. By lunchtime, steel futures in New York surged to $900 per short ton, up from $700 just a week earlier, a nearly 30% jump. Analysts quoted by the Wall Street Journal warned that the hike could price out half of the world's mills. Calls from Cleveland to Monterey lit up with panic. Steel cleared at Tuesday's price would cause losses by Wednesday. Automakers knew disaster was coming. Each pickup needs about 1 ton of steel, so factories braced immediately. Ford, GM, and Stellantis saw their share values dip as investors reacted to the tariff shock. What was announced as a shield for U.S. workers was already turning into a looming cost bomb for America's largest manufacturers. Only hours after Trump's tariff was announced, Ottawa hit back hard. Canada froze almost every outbound steel shipment to the U.S., blocking more than 12 million tons of supply that normally moves south each year. Prime Minister Mark Carney called the move an own goal of historic sale and warned Washington that Canada would not be used as a dumping ground. At the same time, Ottawa unveiled a Canadian $1.8 billion export expansion plan to redirect Canadian steel toward buyers in Asia and Europe. The Canadian Steel Producers Association confirmed that U.S. orders had basically vanished overnight. Inside Canada, Hamilton's furnaces restarted at full strength, while across the border, Detroit's assembly lines began stalling for lack of raw material. This was not just retaliation, it was a strategic shift. By cutting off the United States and opening new lanes to Asia and Europe, Canada showed it could weaponize steel trade as leverage. Carney's message was clear. If America builds walls, Canada will build bridges elsewhere. Detroit was the first to feel the pain. Within days of Trump's tariff, Ford was forced to shut down 2 lines at its River Rouge foundry, leaving workers idle and machines cold. Every F-150 pickup requires about 1 ton of steel, and now that steel costs nearly $900 per ton. Ford faces a crushing $3 billion bill this year alone. General Motors and Stellantis also warned investors of falling profits, but Washington kept insisting the tariff was protection. The reality was the opposite. In April, Michigan's unemployment spiked to 5.4%, the worst in the nation, as auto plants slowed down for lack of Canadian steel. Dealers added extra charges of up to $2,000 per vehicle, pushing ordinary families out of the market. Detroit, once the symbol of American industry, was left helpless, its factories silenced, its workers uncertain, while Canada's mills roared to life. Trump promised strength, but his policy delivered weakness, and Detroit is now paying the price for Washington's gamble. The shock of Trump's tariff was not limited to factories. Wall Street also felt the blow. On the day the steel duty hit headlines, the S&P 500 dropped 0.5%, wiping out billions in value within hours. Investors called it the Trump shock, and auto stocks led the fall. But the real pain was not on trading floors, it was on Main Street. The Tax Foundation estimated that tariffs will cost the average U.S. family $1,296 this year, money equal to a month's groceries gone overnight. For automakers, the damage hit hard. GM projects $1 billion in tariff exposure, and Stellantis warned of a $1.7 billion hit this year. Dealerships passed costs to customers, adding thousands to car prices and slowing new orders, as automaker losses forced price hikes. Families across America are now paying for Washington's reckless tariff wall, while politicians in D.C. pretend it is protection. The truth is clear. Wall Street lost billions, Main Street lost security, and the United States lost control of its own supply chain. While America stumbled, Canada turned crisis into opportunity. On July 16, 2025, Ottawa announced a $1 billion clean steel modernization fund to replace old coal furnaces with hydrogen and electric arc technology. Ontario's power grid is already approximately 93% emissions-free, making its steel much cleaner than global averages. This gave Canada an advantage, as the EU's carbon border adjustment mechanism is set to take effect in 2026. That means Canadian steel can enter Europe tariff-free, while U.S. steel, still mostly coal-produced, will face high carbon fees both abroad and at home. Hamilton's mills are already expanding production and winning contracts in Asia and Europe, while American plants are stuck with rising costs and shrinking buyers. Ottawa is building bridges, Washington is building walls. Canada invested in the future, the U.S. clung to the past, and now the gap is clear. America is falling behind, while Canada takes control of the steel market. Canada's fight did not stop at steel. On July 22, 2025, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Ontario signed a memorandum of understanding that requires every new pipeline, rail spur, or mining project be built using steel melted in Ontario, effectively blocking U.S. pipe mills from Canadian bids. Last year, Canada shipped about 6.5 million tons of steel to the U.S., including over 1 million tons of line pipe. Now that supply is kept at home or rerouted internationally. Before the tariff war, the U.S. imported nearly 40% of its oil country tubular goods from Canada and Mexico, and industry analysts project Canadian pipe costs to rise by around 15%. This cost spike is hammering small energy firms in Texas and North Dakota. Many projects are now stalling under price pressure. Meanwhile, Alberta is holding on to pipeline fabrication work and profits, while U.S. companies are cut out. Once again, Canada used smart strategy to strengthen its industry, while Washington watched its energy companies stranded. The result is clear. Canada builds its energy future, America's steel-dependent drillers are left behind. While America built walls with tariffs, Europe built a gate with carbon rules. On January 1, 2026, the European Union's Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism takes effect, imposing nearly $90 per ton in carbon fees on imported steel. For Canada, this is no problem. Its mills run on clean, renewable energy grids and produce a green-tagged steel that passes into Europe with no extra cost. For the United States, it is a disaster. Most U.S. steel comes from coal-fired plants, meaning every ton shipped to Europe will face heavy CBAM penalties on top of Trump's 50% tariff at home. European buyers will choose Canadian coal, while U.S. producers watch their exports collapse. Analysts at the Financial Times already warn this is a calculated shift, not a reaction. Canada gains markets, the EU gains cleaner supply, and the U.S. loses both buyers and credibility. America is being punished twice, once for dirty steel and again for bad policy. The truth behind Trump's tariffs is bigger than steel. America said it wanted to protect workers, but the policy has done the opposite. By cutting off Canadian supply, Washington weakened Detroit, raised prices for families, and handed control of the steel market to its neighbor. Canada used the crisis to modernize its mills, invest in clean hydrogen technology, and lock in new trade routes with Asia and Europe. The European Union rewarded Canada with open access under its carbon rules, while U.S. steel was punished for being dirty and outdated. Even in energy, Alberta made sure American drillers lost contracts while Canadian companies kept the profits at home. Wall Street lost billions, Main Street lost savings, and Washington lost credibility. The tariff war exposed a simple fact. The United States is no longer shaping global trade. It is being outmaneuvered by allies who are smarter and faster. What was sold as protection became a self-inflicted wound, turning America's strongest industries into its weakest link. The bigger picture is clear. Canada is building a future with clean steel and new markets, while the U.S. is stuck with old furnaces, higher costs, and broken promises. Detroit's machines are silent. Canada's furnaces are roaring, and Europe has already chosen its winner. Subscribe now for more breaking insights and tell us, should America tear down Trump's tariff wall or double down and risk collapse?